Hi everyone, it's Ren here. I hope that you're doing well, and today I would like to talk to you about the importance of Nietzsche because I was discussing it with a friend recently, and that friend, who shall remain anonymous but who will recognize herself, was expressing this idea that Nietzsche was popular these days after well over 100 years of his writings coming out, primarily just because he spoke to a certain teen angst and edgelordiness that he might have embodied himself in a kind of eloquent fashion that people can easily relate to. But I mean, having such an understanding of Nietzsche is fine. I think it is an understanding that is shared by a lot of people. But in this video, I will try to make the case that Nietzsche is more profound than he's often given credit for, and I will thereby try to explain that this depth is what really explains not just his relative fame and popularity with people who are not only within the philosophical profession. You know, Nietzsche's influence is in he's influential on artists, people of all walks of life, probably even sportsmen, so I think that he has been enduringly popular, enduringly influential on people, and that has never really stopped. So let's try to understand why, or let's try to show why, through zeroing in on maybe one aspect of his philosophy. Because obviously I cannot make too many videos on Nietzsche. I don't want to make a long video because that's kind of annoying sometimes. So I want to really focus on what I think is essentially Nietzsche. So in perhaps the very first video that I ever made on my philosophical background, I talked about how Nietzsche developed his concept of the will to power as an alternative to essence, in the sense that a will to power replaces the concept of essence as something that does not limit any being, anything, any existence to a particular set of properties, because that is inherently limiting of the definition of a being or of an entity or of whatever you want to call it. But a will to power has this conception of expanse at the heart of it. So things are a potential constantly striving to realize itself, whether it be the things in nature, a plant, a tree, an animal, or man, particularly maybe more than anybody else, man, because his will to power can carry him potentially into infinite lengths, maybe not infinite, but very far away. And that's a very influential concept of Nietzsche. Now, is that the reason why he is enduringly popular? I think probably partly yes, but linked to it, because I cannot emphasize this enough. Nietzsche's philosophy is very, very, very consistent. Everything is linked. It might not appear like it because he doesn't speak in very technical language. He speaks in very poetic, aphoristic language, as you know, but that conceals the eloquence, the beauty of his writing. Some people consider the writing to be actually a little bit pompous, a little bit flowery, too many words. My brother has never been a big fan of Nietzsche's style, but I think overall he has a quite virtuosic style. Very eloquent, so many quotes, so many quotables, as the young people say today about rap songs, so many quotables. So Nietzsche has a lot of them, you probably know a lot of them. So he has that, but behind that is hidden a very well interlinked, systematic sort of approach. Maybe I don't want to call it a system, but you can definitely call it a systematic approach to metaphysics and ethics, at least. The metaphysics of Nietzsche is often not considered a metaphysics, because he himself claims that he doesn't really subscribe to metaphysics, at least in the Platonist tradition, but he really has a metaphysical system, which actually Heidegger tries to systemize even further, perhaps make more technical, more easily referenced than Nietzsche's poetic escapades in Zarathustra, in The Gay Science, in The Twilight of the Idols, and many other great books. And Genealogy of Morals. So here, I'm not going to focus on this metaphysical concept of the will to power. I do think that it is very influential and very important, and I've emphasized this point before, so I'm not going to repeat it. But linked to it, because again everything is systematic in Nietzsche, is this idea that ethics is a field that has really been misunderstood, or at least that we take ethics to be something, or morals. Let's use the word morals, maybe it will not confuse people as much. Morals are something that we should really question, and that is to me, the most direct source of Nietzsche's influence and popularity. Because not only is that very powerful philosophically, and we'll get to it in a second, but it's also easily understood. Morals, a moral framework, is not something that we should take for granted. And when Nietzsche says that, he doesn't just say that. What he means is not only that you should take certain statements of, for example, let's take Christian morality, which is the sort of the focus of Nietzsche in a lot of cases. He's known to have been a very potent and motivated crusader against Christian morality. So, something as simple as, for example, you should never steal, right? You should never steal, or you should never lie, for example. I'm using obvious, ponderous examples just to make them as clear as possible. So you should never lie, well, if you take other systems of morals, for example, the utilitarian system, maybe those systems will say, it's not really about a duty, you don't need to, you should not focus on whether lying is always good or always bad, in this case, always bad. You should focus on what are going to be the consequences of your lying, what is going to be the effect of it. Is it going to be a morally beneficial effect? And then a utilitarian philosopher would kind of proceed to analyze and give the detail of what could be the positive effect, positive moral effects, negative moral effects of a particular act, let's say, and say if it tends to increase the level of happiness, it's a good act. If it decreases it, it's a bad act. Now, so it's a consequentialist system as opposed to a duty-bound deontic system, like the Christian one. So you could easily see that in the case of utilitarianism, lying can be a good act, can be a morally good act. And not lying, saying the truth, can actually be a morally reprehensible one from a certain perspective. You always hear this example of, a Nazi officer comes to your house, you're hiding a Jewish family in your attic, they're asking, are there Jews, are you hiding Jews, are there Jews here? In a sense, and this is not a joke, a Kantian should say yes, should say the truth. You could easily see that in this context, in these circumstances, a utilitarian framework of morality is more convincing. I think in other cases, a deontic system, a duty system is more convincing. But the thing is, Nietzsche's morals is not really at the level of looking at a particular situation and saying, okay, like lying, should we see it as a good thing in this case, or in that case, is it always bad? Like, what Nietzsche calls for is what he calls the revaluation of all values. What he says is that when we discuss moral systems, we discuss, okay, like, does this work better here, or does this work better there? Or a lot of the time what we do is not even that. What we do is that we have a system that we consciously or unconsciously share with others, and like we sort of have debates about what action would be more sort of respectful of that framework. So maybe in the case of like lying, that, you know, the answer would be too obvious for there to be a debate, but there can be situations where like a man is drowning and then there's like somebody else needs help, and you know, it could be a very complex situation, and what to do, it can be a super interesting discussion to try to come to an answer, you know, regarding what to do, and there will be disagreements within a shared framework. But what Nietzsche says is we should look at the values that are implicit in those frameworks. All those frameworks, they share the same sort of understanding about values that are lying, stealing, you know, what should be done in regards to these things. There are a lot of preconceived convictions that are shared between those systems, which allow the conversation to take place in a way. And Nietzsche really challenges that, and he says, where in the world is it written, is it said that you should never kill? To take an extreme example, why is killing evil, murdering? Why do we like automatically, you know, sort of follow these moral frameworks that we inherit in our childhood and then behave as if, you know? So of course that's an extreme example, but you could also take the example of being sexually promiscuous. Why is it conceived as a bad thing? You know, or being, you know, whatever. What Nietzsche says is systems of morals are actually a human creation, which is true, I think. We have systems of morals trying to approximate to what the true essence of morality is, right? So we create our little law-like systems to try to approximate to that. But what Nietzsche says is that in the process, these human-made systems are actually conceived in such a way that they benefit the people who devise those systems. And so if you like, that speaks, I think, potentially to a lot of people, because it means that when you're anywhere, like in the workplace or any environment where you feel like the animosity that you feel or that is expressed towards you, it's not directly on the part of people, but it's maybe on the part of people through you like not really fitting in with the norms, right, or anything. But like there is this kind of sense, this understanding about norms, about what should be done, this kind of architecture that is in the background where like maybe you will not fit in. What Nietzsche says is you should always, absolutely always, put yourself first and contest to that, question it, even if you eventually say, okay, like I agree with this. It makes sense, and perhaps I can work around in order to fit in better, in order to, you know, in order to simply get along better with people, or, you know, question myself. Nietzsche says you should not question yourself first. You should question what an external environment, which is always extremely normative, does, and like what are the norms, can they be looked at, and can they be criticized? So in the case of the genealogy of morals that Nietzsche talks about, he looks at Christian morality and he says, let's look at everything that Christian morality says and that billions of people follow, either very closely or from a distance, and let's try to see whether that holds, or whether actually it might have been devised in such a way that it tries to limit the potential of the people of whom the founders of the Christian morality are jealous or resentful. Because the passion of resentment, as Nietzsche calls it, is a very, very influential concept, which is linked to this whole video that I made, and which I will tackle in the second video. I think I'll make 2 videos about Nietzsche because it's getting a bit long. But this idea is always question the norms, and not only the norms that people most of the time blindly follow because they take them for granted are to be questioned, but sometimes the norms exist precisely to be for the benefit of those who follow or have created them, and to your own detriment. So it's a potentially very, very liberating philosophy, and we will explore more of that next time. See you guys. I hope you enjoyed this. Drop a comment if you are so inclined. It would be appreciated. See ya.